S3 cheat sheet, simple storage service, object-based storage, storage unlimited amounts of data without worrying of underlying storage infrastructure. S3 replicates data across at least three availability zones to ensure 99.99% availability and 11 nines of durability. Objects contain your data. They're like files. Objects can be sized anywhere from 0 bytes to 5 terabytes. Buckets contain objects. Buckets can also contain folders, which can in turn contain objects. Bucket names are unique across all AWS accounts, like a domain name. When you upload a file to S3 successfully, you'll receive an HTTP 200 code. Lifecycle management. Objects can be moved between storage classes, or objects can be deleted automatically based on a schedule. Versioning. Objects are given a version ID. When new objects are uploaded, objects are kept. You can access any object version. When you delete an object, the previous object is restored. Once versioning is turned on, it cannot be turned off, only suspended. MFA delete. Enforce delete operations to require MFA token in order to delete an object. Must have versioning turned on to use. Can only turn on MFA delete from AWS CLI. Root account is only allowed to delete objects. All new buckets are private by default. Logging can be turned on. Logging can be turned to on a bucket to log to track operations performed on objects. Access control is configured using bucket policies and access control lists. Bucket policies are JSON documents which let you write complex control access. ACLs are the legacy method not deprecated, where you grant access to objects and buckets with simple actions. S3 Cheat Sheet Part 2. Security in transit. Uploading files is done over SSL. SSE, which stands for server-side encryption, stands for server-side encryption. S3 has 3 options for SSE. SSE, AES. S3 handles the key, uses AES 256 algorithm. SSE KMS, and envelope encryption via AWS KMS, and you manage the keys. SSE C, customer provided key, you manage the keys. Client-side encryption, you must encrypt your own files before uploading them to S3. Cross-region replication, CRR, allows you to replicate files across regions for greater durability. You must have versioning turned on in the source and destination bucket. You can have CRR, cross-region replication, replicate to bucket in another AWS account. Transfer acceleration, provide faster and secure uploads from anywhere in the world. Data is uploaded via distinct URL to an edge location. Data is then transported to your S3 bucket via AWS Backbone Network. Pre-signed URLs is a URL generated via the AWS CLI and SDK. It provides temporary access to write or download object data. Pre-signed URLs are commonly used to access private objects. S3 Cheat Sheet Part 3. S3 has 6 different storage classes: standard, fast, 99% availability, 11 nines durability, replicated across at least 3 AZs. Intelligent tiering, using machine learning to analyze your object usage and determine the appropriate storage class. Data is moved to the most cost-effective access tier without any performance impact or added overhead. Standard infrequently accessed, still fast, cheaper if you access files less than a month. Additional retrieval fee is applied. 50% less than standard, reduced availability. One zone infrequent access, that's what AI stands for. Still fast, objects only exist in one AZ. Availability is 99.5%, but cheaper than standard infrequent access by 20% less. Reduced durability, data could get destroyed. A retrieval fee is applied. Glacier, for long-term storage, cold storage. Retrieval of data can take minutes to hours, but the off is very cheap. Storage. Glacier Deep Archive, the lowest cost storage class data retrieval time is 12 hours. Snowball and Snow Edge and Snowmobile Cheat Sheet. Snowball and Snowball Edge is a rugged container which contains a storage device. Snowball is a 45-foot long rugged shipping container pulled by a semi-trailer truck. Snowball and Snow Edge is a petascale migration. Snowmobile is an exabyte scale migration. Low cost, thousands of dollars to transfer 100 terabytes over high-speed internet. Snowball is 1/5 of that price. Speed, 100 terabytes over 100 days to transfer over high-speed internet. Snowball takes less than a week. Snowball comes in two sizes, 50 terabytes, 42 terabytes of usable space, 80 terabytes, 72 terabytes of usable space. Snowball Edge comes in two sizes, 100 terabytes, 83 terabytes of usable space, 100 terabytes clustered, 45 terabyte per node. Snowmobile comes in one size, 100 petabytes. You can both export or import data using Snowball or Snowmobile. You can import S3. You can import into S3 or Glacier using Snowmobile, Snowball Edge. Snowball Edge can undertake local processing and edge computing workloads. Snowball Edge can use in a cluster in groups of 5 to 10 devices. Snowball Edge provides 3 options for device configurations: storage optimized, compute optimized, GPU optimized. VPC Endpoint Cheat Sheet. VPC endpoints help keep traffic between AWS services within the AWS network. There are 2 kinds of VPC endpoints: interface endpoint and gateway endpoints. Interface endpoints cost money. Gateway endpoints are free. Interface endpoint uses Elastic Network Interface with private IP powered by AWS Private Link. Gateway endpoints is a target for a specific route in your route table. Interface endpoints support many AWS services. Gateway endpoint only support DynamoDB and S3. VPC Flow Logs Cheat Sheet. VPC flow logs monitor the in and out traffic of your network interfaces within your VPC. You can turn on flow logs at the VPC, subnet, or network interface level. VPC flow logs cannot be tagged like other AWS resources. You cannot change the configuration of a flow log after it's created. You cannot enable flow logs for VPC which are paired with your VPC unless it is in the same account. VPC flow logs can be delivered to an S3 or CloudWatch logs. VPC flow logs contain the source and destination IP addresses, not host names. Some instance traffic is not monitored. Instance traffic generated by contacting the AWS DNS servers. Windows license activation traffic from instances. Traffic to and from instance metadata address. DHCP traffic. Any traffic to the reserved IP address of the default VPC router. Network Access Control List, NACLs. An optional layer of security that acts as a firewall for controlling traffic in and out of subnets. NACL use case: we determine there is a malicious actor at a specific IP address is trying to access our instance, so we block their IP. You cannot block an IP with security groups? Well, as a matter of fact, I believe you can. We'll find out. We never need to SSH into instances. We can add deny for these subnets. This is just an additional measure in case security groups SSH port was left open. NACL cheat sheet. NACL, Network Access Control List, is commonly known as NACL. VPCs are automatically given a default NACL, which allows all outbound and inbound traffic. Each subnet with a VPC must be associated with a NACL. Subnets can only be associated with one NACL at a time. Associating a subnet with a new NACL will remove the previous association. If a NACL is not explicitly associated with the subnet will automatically be associated with the default NACL. NACL has inbound and outbound rules, just like security groups. Rules can either allow or deny traffic, unlike security groups, which can only allow traffic. NACLs are stateless. That means any allowed inbound traffic is also allowed outbound. When you create a NACL, it will deny all traffic by default. NACLs contain a numbered list of rules that gets evaluated in order from lowest to highest. If you need to block a single IP address, you could via NACLs. Security groups cannot deny. Security group cheat sheet. Security groups act as a firewall at the instance level. Unless allowed specifically, all inbound traffic is blocked by default. All outbound traffic from the instance is allowed by default. You can specific for the source to be either an IP range, single IP address, or any security group. Security groups are stateful. If traffic is allowed inbound, it is also allowed outbound. Any changes to a security group take effect immediately. EC2 instances can belong to multiple security groups. Security groups can contain multiple EC2 instances. You cannot block specific IP addresses with security groups. For this, you would need a network access control list, or NACL. You can have up to 10,000 security groups per region. Default 25,000. 2,500. You can have 60 inbound and 60 outbound rules per security group. You can have 16 security groups associated to an ENI. Default is 5. NAT instance and NAT gateway cheat sheet. When you create a NAT instance, you must disable source and destination checks on the instance. NAT instances must exist in a public subnet. You must have a route out of the private subnet to the NAT instance. The size of the NAT instance determines how much traffic can be handled. High availability can be achieved using auto-scaling, multiple subnets in different AZs, and automate failover between them using a script. NAT gateways, on the other hand, are redundant inside an AZ, or availability zone. Can survive failure of EC2 instances. You can only have one NAT gateway inside one availability zone. Cannot span AZs. Starts at 5, so NAT gateways start at 5 gigabytes and scales all the way up to 45 gigabytes. NAT gateways are the preferred setup for enterprise systems. There is no requirement to patch NAT gateways, and there is no need to disable source/destination checks for the NAT gateway, unlike NAT instances. NAT gateways are automatically assigned a public IP address. Route tables for the NAT gateway must be updated. Resources in multiple AZs sharing a gateway will lose internet access if the gateway goes down, unless you create a gateway in each AZ and configure route tables accordingly. RDS cheat sheet. Relational database service is an AWS solution for relational databases. RDS instances are managed by AWS. You cannot SSH into the VM running the database. There are 6 relational database options currently available on AWS. They are Aurora, MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle, MySQL Server, or Microsoft SQL Server. Multiple AZ is an option you can turn on, which makes an exact copy of your database in another AZ that is only standby. For multi-AZ, AWS automatically synchronizes changes in the database over the standby copy. Multi-AZ has automatic failover protection. If one AZ goes down, failover will occur and a standby slave will be promoted to master. Read replicas allow you to run multiple copies of your database. These copies only allow reads, no writes, and is intended to alleviate the workload of your primary database to improve performance. Read replicas use asynchronous replication. You must have automatic backups enabled to use read replicas. You can have up to 5 read replicas, RDS Cheat Sheet Part 2. You can have up to 5 read replicas. You can combine read replicas with multi-AZ. You can have read replicas in another region, cross-region read replicas. Replicas can be promoted to their own database, but this breaks replication. You can have replicas of read replicas. RDS has 2 backup solutions: automated backups and database snapshots. Automated backups, you choose a retention period between 1 and 35 days. There is no additional cost for backup storage. You define your backup window. Manual snapshots, you manually create updates. If you delete your primary, the manual snapshots will still exist and can be restored. When you restore an instance, it will create a new database. You just need to delete your old database and point traffic to new restored database. You can turn on encryption at rest for RDS via KMS, Key Management System. Aurora Cheat Sheet. When you need a fully managed Postgres or MySQL database that needs to scale, automatic backups, high availability, and fault tolerance, think Aurora. Aurora can run MySQL or Postgres database engines, and also keep in mind Aurora is also serverless. Aurora MySQL is 5 times faster over regular MySQL. Aurora Postgres is 3 times faster over regular Postgres. Aurora is 1/10 the cost over its competitors with similar performance and availability options. Aurora replicates 6 copies for your database across 3 availability zones. Aurora is allowed up to 15 Aurora replicas. An Aurora database can span multiple regions via Aurora Global Database. Aurora Serverless allows you to stop and start Aurora and scale automatically while keeping costs low. Aurora Serverless is ideal for new projects or projects with infrequent database usage. Amazon Redshift. Fully managed petabyte-sized data warehouse. Analyze, run complex SQL queries on massive amounts of data, columnar store database. Redshift Cheat Sheet. Data can be loaded from S3, EMR, DynamoDB, or multiple data source or remote host. Redshift is columnar store database, which can SQL-like queries and is an OLAP. Redshift can handle petabytes worth of data. Redshift is for data warehousing. Redshift most common use case is business intelligence. Redshift can only run in one availability zone, single AZ. Redshift can run via a single node or multiple node clusters. A single node is 160 gigabytes in size. A multi-node is comprised of a leader node and a multiple computer node. You are billed per hour for each node, excluding leader node in multi-mode. You are not built for the leader node. You can have up to 128 compute nodes. Redshift has two kinds of node types, dense compute and dense storage. Redshift tends to back up 3 copies of your data, the original on the compute node and on S3. Similar data is stored on disk sequentially for faster reads. Redshift can be encrypted via KMS or Cloud HSM. Backup retention is default to 1 day and can increase to maximum of 35 days. Redshift can asynchronously back up your snapshot to another region delivered to S3. Redshift uses massively parallel processing to distribute queries and data across all loads. In the case of empty table, when importing Redshift, we'll sample data to create a schema. DynamoDB, a key value and document database, NoSQL, which can guarantee consistent read and writes at any level, at any scale. DynamoDB is a fully managed NoSQL key value and document database. Applications that contain large amounts of data but require predictable read and write performance while scaling is a good fit for DynamoDB. DynamoDB scales with whatever read and write capacities you specify per second. DynamoDB can be set to eventually consistent reads default, which is a default, and strongly consistent reads. Eventually consistent reads data is returned immediately but can be inconsistent. Copies of data will be generally consistent in 1 second. Strongly consistent reads will wait until data is consistent. Data will never be inconsistent, but latency will be higher. Copies of data will be consistent with a guarantee of 1 second. DynamoDB stores 3 copies of data on SSD drives across 3 regions. AWS CloudFormation. AWS CloudFormation is a template language that defines AWS resources to be provisioned, automating the creation of a resource via code, infrastructure as code. CloudFormation cheat sheet. When being asked to automate the provisioning of resources, think CloudFormation. When infrastructure as code is mentioned, think CloudFormation. CloudFormation can be written in either JSON or YAML. When CloudFormation encounters an error, it will roll back with rollback in progress. CloudFormation templates larger than 51,200 bytes are too large to upload directly and must be imported into CloudFormation via S3 bucket. Nested stacks help you break up CloudFormation template into smaller reusable templates that can be composed into larger templates. At least one resource under resources must be defined for a CloudFormation template to be valid. Metadata, extra information about your metadata is extra information about your template. Description is a description of what the template is supposed to do. Parameters is how you get users' input into templates. Transforms applies Marcos, like applying a mod which changed the anatomy to be custom. Outputs are values you can use to import into other stacks. Mappings maps keys to values just like a lookup table. Resources defines the resources you want to provision. At least one resource is required. Conditions are whether resources are created or properties are assigned. CloudWatch is a collection of monitoring services for logging, reacting, and visualizing log data. CloudWatch cheat sheet. CloudWatch is a collection of monitoring services, dashboards, events, alarms, logs, and metrics. CloudWatch logs log data from AWS services, example, CPU utilization. CloudWatch metrics represents a time-ordered set of data points, a variable to monitor, example, CPU utilization over time. CloudWatch events trigger an event based on a condition. Example, every hour take a snapshot of a server. CloudWatch alarms triggers notifications based on metrics when a defined threshold is breached. CloudWatch dashboards creates visualization based on metrics. EC2 monitors at 5-minute intervals and at detailed monitoring 1-minute intervals. Most other services monitor at 1-minute intervals with intervals 1, 3, and 5 minutes. Logs must belong to a log group. CloudWatch agent needs to be installed on EC2 host to track memory usage and disk size. You can stream custom log files, example production.log. Custom metrics allow you to track high-resolution metrics at submitted intervals all the way down to 1 second. CloudTrail. Logs API calls between AWS services when you need to know who to blame. CloudTrail cheat sheet. CloudTrail logs calls between AWS services, governance, compliance, operational auditing, and risk auditing are keywords related to CloudTrail. When you need to know who to blame, think CloudTrail. CloudTrail by default logs event data for the past 90 days via event history. To track beyond 90 days, you need to create trail. To ensure logs have not been tampered with, you need to turn on log file validation option. CloudTrail logs can be encrypted using KMS. CloudTrail logs can be set to log across all AWS accounts in an organization and all regions in an account. CloudTrail logs can be streamed to CloudWatch logs. Trails are outputted to an S3 bucket that you specify. CloudTrail logs, 2 kinds of events: management events and data events. Management events log management operations attached role policy. Data events log data operations for resources. S3 Lambda. Get object, example, get object, delete object, put object. Data events are disabled by default when creating a trail. Trail logs in S3 can be analyzed using Athena. AWS Lambda. Run code without provisioning or managing servers. Servers automatically start and stop when needed. Serverless functions. Pay per invocation. Lambda cheat sheet. Lambdas are serverless functions. You upload your code and it runs without you managing or provisioning any servers. Lambda is serverless. So when something says provisioned, that means it's not serverless. Lambda is serverless. You don't need to worry about underlying architecture. Lambda is a good fit for short running tasks when you don't need to customize the operation system environment. If you need long-running tasks greater than 15 minutes in a custom OS environment, then consider using Fargate. There are 7 runtime language environments officially supported by Lambda: Ruby, Python, Java, Node.js, C#, PowerShell, and Go. You pay per invocation. The duration and the amount of memory used, rounded up to the nearest 100 milliseconds, and you based on amount of requests. First million requests per month are free with Lambda. You can adjust the duration timeout for up to 15 minutes and memory for up to 308 megabytes. You can trigger Lambdas from the SDK or multiple AWS services, example, S3, API Gateway, DynamoDB. Lambdas by default run in no VPC. To interact with some services, you need to have your Lambda in the same VPC, example, RDS. Lambda can scale to 1,000 to 1,000 of concurrent functions in seconds. 1,000 is a default. You can increase with AWS service limit increase. Lambdas have cold starts if a function has not been recently executed. There will be a delay. Simple queue service, fully managed queuing service that enables you to decouple and scale microservices, distributed systems, and serverless applications. SQS is a queuing service using messages with a queue. Think Sidekick or RabbitMQ. SQS is used for application integration. It lets decoupled services and apps talk to each other. To read SQS to read SQS, you need to pull the queue using the AWS SDK. SQS is not push-based. SQS supports both standard and first-in, first-out queues. Standard allows nearly unlimited messages per second, does not guarantee order of delivery, which is called best order processing. Always delivers at least once. You must protect, again, duplicate messages being processed. FIFO maintained the order of messages with a 300 limit. There are two kinds of polling. Short defaults and long polling. Short polling returns messages immediately, even if the message queue being pulled is empty. Long polling waits until the message arrives in a queue or the long poll timeout expires. In majority of cases, long polling is preferred over short polling. Visibility timeout is a period of time that messages are invisible in the SQS queue. Messages will be deleted from the queue after a job has processed before visibility timeout expires. If visibility timeout expires, then a job will become visible to the queue. The default visibility timeout is 30 seconds. Timeout can be 0 seconds to a maximum of 12 hours. SQS can retain from 60 seconds to 14 days, can retain messages from 60 seconds to 14 days, and by default is 4 days. Message size between 1 byte and 256 kilobytes. Extended client library for Java can increase to 2 gigabytes. Simple notification service is a subscribe and send notification via text message, webhooks, lambdas, SQS, and mobile notifications. SNS cheat sheet. Simple notification service is a fully managed pub/sub messaging service, which means when it says fully managed, it means AWS manages it. SNS is for application integration. It allows decoupled services and apps to communicate with each other. Topic, a logical access point. Topic, which is a logical access point and communication channel. A topic is able to deliver multiple protocols. You can encrypt topics via KMS. Publishers use AWS API via AWS CLI or SDK to push messages to a topic. Many AWS services integrate with SNS and act as publishers. Subscriptions subscribe to topics. When a topic receives a message, it automatically and immediately pushes messages to subscribers. All messages published to SNS are stored redundantly across multiple AZs. The following protocols: HTTPS, HTTPs create webhooks into your web application. Email, good for internal email notifications, only support plain text. Email JSON, email sends JSON via email. Amazon SQS, place SNS message into SQS queue. AWS Lambda triggers a Lambda function. SMS, send a text message. Platform application endpoints. Mobile push, example, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Bandhu notification systems. Elasticache, managed caching service which either runs Redis or memcached. Elasticache is a managed in-memory caching service. Elasticache can launch either memcache or Redis. Memcache is a simple key value store preferred for caching HTML fragments and is arguably faster than Redis. Redis has richer data types and operations great for leaderboard geospatial data or keeping track of unread notifications. A cache is a temporary storage area. Most frequently identical queries are stored in the cache. Resources only within the same VPC may connect to Elasticache to ensure low latencies. Elastic Beanstalk Cheat Sheet. Elastic Beanstalk handles the deployment from capacity provisioning, load balancing, auto scaling to application health monitoring. When you want to run a web application but you don't want to have to think about the underlying infrastructure. It costs nothing to use Elastic Beanstalk, only the resources it provisions, example, RDS, ELB, EC2. It's recommended for test or development apps, not recommended for production use. You can choose from the following pre-configured platforms: Java, .NET, PHP, Node, Python, Ruby, Go, and Docker. You can run Dockerized environments on Elastic Beanstalk. API Gateway, fully managed service to create, publish, maintain, monitor, and secure APIs at any scale. API Gateway Cheat Sheet. API Gateway, all right, pause here. API Gateway is a solution. API Gateway Cheat Sheet. API Gateway is a solution for creating secure APIs in your cloud environment at any scale. Create APIs that act as a front door for application access, business logic, or functionality from back-end services. API Gateway throttles API endpoints at 10,000 requests per second, can be increased via request through AWS support. Stages, API stages, allow you to have multiple published versions of your API. Example, production, staging, QA. Each stage has an invoke URL. So invoke URL is associated with API Gateway, which is the endpoint you use to interact with your API. You can use a custom domain for your invoke URL. You need to publish your API via deploy API. You choose which stage you want to publish your API. Resources are your URLs. Resources are your URLs. Example / projects / projects. Resources have child resources. Example / projects / ID / edit. You define multiple methods on your resources. Example, get, post, delete. CORS, issues, I believe that stands for cross origin. I forgot. CORS issues are common with API Gateway. CORS can be enabled on all individual endpoints. Caching improves latency and reduces the amount of calls made to your endpoints. Same origin policies help to prevent XSS attacks. So same origin policies help to prevent XSS attacks. Same origin policies ignore tools like Postman or curl. CORS is always enforced by the client. You can require authorization to your API via AWS Cognito or a custom Lambda. Amazon Kinesis, scalable and durable real-time data streaming service to ingest and analyze data in real time from multiple sources. Elastic File System, which is EFS, scalable Elastic native NFS file system Attach a single file system to multiple EC2 instances. Don't worry about running out or managing disk space. Kinesis cheat sheet. Amazon Kinesis is the AWS solution for collecting, processing, and analyzing streaming data in the cloud when you need real-time. Think Kinesis. Kinesis data streams pay per shard, running shard. Data can persist within the stream. Data is ordered, and every consumer keeps its own position. Consumers have to be manually added, coded. Data persists for 24 hours by default, up to 168 hours. Kinesis Firehose. Pay for only the data ingested. Data immediately disappears once processed. Consumer of choice is from a predefined set of services: S3, Redshift, Elasticache, or Splunk. Kinesis data analytics allows you to perform queries in real time. Needs a Kinesis data streams Firehose as input and output. Kinesis Video Analytics securely ingests and stores video and audio encoded data to consumers such as SageMaker Recognition or other services to apply machine learning and video processing. KPL, Kinesis Producer Library, is a Java library to write data to a stream. You can write data to stream using AWS SDK, but KPL, Kinesis Producer Library, is more efficient. AWS Storage Gateway, backing up on-premise storage to the cloud. Storage Gateway Cheat Sheet. Storage Gateway connects on-premise storage to cloud storage, hybrid storage solution. There are 3 types of gateways: File Gateway, Volume Gateway, Tape Gateway. File Gateway lets S3 act as a local file system using NFS, or MB extends your local hard drive to S3. Volume Gateway is used for backups and has 2 types: stored and cached. Stored Volume Gateway continuously backups local storage to S3 as EBS snapshots. Primary data is on-premise. Storage volumes are 1 GB to 16 TB in size. Cached Volume Gateway caches the frequently used files on-premise. Primary data is stored on S3. Cache volumes are 1 GB to 32 GB in size. Tape Gateway backs up virtual tapes to S3 Glacier for long archive storage. EFS Cheat Sheet. Elastic File System supports Network File System version protocol, version 4 protocol. You pay per gigabytes of storage per month. Volumes can scale to petabyte size storage. Volumes will shrink and grow to meet current data stored. You can support thousands of concurrent connections over NFS. Your data is stored across multiple AZs within a region. Can count multiple EC2 instances to a single EFS as long as they are in the same VPC. Creates mount points in all your VPC subnets so you can run from anywhere within your VPC. Provides read after write consistency. Elastic Block Store. A virtual hard drive in the cloud. Create new volumes attached to EC2 instances, backup via snapshots, and easy encryption. EBS Cheat Sheet. Elastic Block Store is a virtual hard disk. Snapshots are point-in-time copy of that disk. Volumes exist on EBS. Snapshots exist on S3. Snapshots are incremental. Only changes made since the last snapshot are moved to S3. Initial snapshots of an EC2 instance will take longer to create that subsequent snapshot. If taking snapshots of a root volume, the EC2 instance should be stopped before snapshotting. You can take snapshots while the instance is still running. You can create AMIs from volumes or from snapshots. EBS volumes are durable, are a durable block level storage devices that can attach to a single EC2 instance. EBS volumes can be modified on the fly, example storage type or volume size. Volumes always exist in the same AZ as the EC2 instance. Instance store volumes, a temporary storage type located on disk that are physically attached to a host machine. Instance store volumes, ephemeral, cannot be stopped. If the host fails, then you lose your data. EBS backed instances can be stopped and you will not lose any data. By default, root volumes are deleted on termination. EBS volumes can have termination protection. Don't delete the volume on termination. Snapshots or restored encrypted volumes can also be encrypted. You cannot share a snapshot if it has been encrypted. Unencrypted snapshots can be shared with other AWS accounts or made public. CloudFront, Content Distribution Network, creates cached copies of your website at various edge locations around the world. IAM Cheat Sheet, Identity Access Manager, is used to manage access to users and resources. IAM is a universal system, applied to all regions at the same time. IAM is a free service. A root account is the account initially created when AWS is set up. Full administrator. New IAM accounts have no permissions by default until granted. New users get assigned an access key ID and secret when first created when you give them programmatic access. Access keys are only used for CLI and SDK, cannot access console. Access keys are only shown once when created. If lost, they must be deleted or recreated again. Always set up MFA for root accounts. Users must enable MFA on their own. Administrator cannot turn it on for each user. IAM roles allows you to set password policies to set minimum password requirements or rotate passwords. IAM identities are users, groups, and roles. IAM users, end users who log into the console or interact with AWS resources programmatically. IAM groups are users, or a group of your users, so they all share permission levels of the group. Example, administrators, developers, auditors. IAM roles, associated permissions to a role and then assign this to users or groups. IAM policies, JSON documents which grant permissions for a specific user, group, or role to access services. Policies are attached to the IAM identities. Managed policies are policies provided by AWS and cannot be edited. Customer managed policies are policies created by the customer which you can edit. Inline policies are policies which are directly attached to a user. Amazon Cognito, decentralized managed authentication, sign up, sign in, integration for your apps, social identity provider, example, Facebook, Google. Cognito cheat sheet. Cognito is decentralized managed authentication system. When you need to easily add authentication to your mobile and desktop app, think Cognito. User pools. User directory allows users to authenticate using OAuth to IPD, such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, to connect to web applications. Cognito user pool is in itself an IPD. User pools use JWS or JSON web tokens for to persist authentication. Identity pools provide temporary Cognito identity pools provide temporary AWS credentials to access services such as S3, DynamoDB. Cognito Sync can sync user data and preferences across devices with one line of code powered by SNS. Web Identity Federation exchange identity and security information between an identity provider and an application. Identity provider, a trusted provider of your user identity that lets you authenticate to access other services. Example, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon. OIDC is a type of identity provider which uses OAuth. SAML is a type of identity provider which is used for single sign-on. Amazon Software Development Kit. Control multiple AWS services using popular programming languages. AWS CLI and SDK cheat sheet. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. SDK stands for Software Development Kit. AWS CLI lets you interact with AWS from anywhere by simply using a command line. AWS SDK is a set of API libraries that let you integrate AWS services into your applications. Programmatic access must be enabled per user via the IAM console to use CLI or SDK. AWS config is a command used to set up AWS credentials for the CLI. The CLI is installed via a Python script. Credentials get stored in plain text. Whenever possible, use roles instead of AWS credentials. The SDK is available for the following programming languages: C++, Go, JavaScript, Java, .NET, Node.js, PHP, Python, and Ruby. Domain name system. It is the phone book of the internet. DNS translates domain names to IP addresses so browsers can find internet resources. DNS cheat sheet. Domain name service is an internet service that converts domain names into routable IP addresses. IPv4, Internet Protocol version 4, 32 terabytes, limited number of addresses. Top level domains is an example .com, last part of the domain, so .com is the top level domain. Second level domain, example.co.uk, the CO, second last part of the domain. Domain registrar, third party company who, when you register, who you can register your domains through. Name server, the server which contains the DNS record for a domain. Start of authority, SOA, contains information about DNS zone and associated DNS records. A record, DNS record, which lets you directly convert a domain name into an IP address. CNAME, DNS record, which lets you convert a domain name into an other domain name. TTL, or time to live, the time that a DNS record will be cached for. Lower time means changes propagate faster. That's it. Got this, cannot miss.